The autumn sun hung low over Detroit, casting long shadows across Mike Torres's small auto repair shop on the east side of the city. The air smelled of motor oil and old coffee, familiar scents that had become as much a part of Mike's life as breathing. He wiped the grease from his hands with a worn red rag, squinting at the temperamental transmission spread out before him on the workbench. "Dad! Dad, look what I made at school!" 7-year-old Emma burst through the side door, her backpack bouncing against her small frame. Her brown curls were pulled back in a slightly crooked ponytail, Mike's best attempt that morning, and her gap-toothed smile lit up the dimly lit garage. Mike's weathered face softened instantly. At 34, he looked older than his years, the result of too many sleepless nights and too much worry. But when Emma smiled, those worries seemed to disappear, if only for a moment. "What have you got there, Mija?" he asked, crouching down to her level. Emma thrust a construction paper card into his oil-stained hands. It was decorated with glitter, stickers, and a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "It's us. Mrs. Henderson said we had to make cards for people we love." Mike felt his throat tighten. 3 years had passed since Maria's death in the car accident. 3 years of figuring out how to be both mother and father to this incredible little girl. He pulled Emma into a hug, not caring that he was probably getting grease on her school uniform. "It's perfect, baby. We'll put it right up on the fridge when we get home." The moment was interrupted by his phone buzzing in his pocket. Mike glanced at the screen, St. Catherine's Children's Hospital. His stomach dropped. Emma had been going there for regular checkups since the accident, monitoring a small heart murmur the doctor said was nothing to worry about, but scheduled appointments didn't usually warrant phone calls. "Mr. Torres, this is Brenda from St. Catherine's Volunteer Coordination," a warm voice said when he answered. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "No, it's fine." "Is everything okay with Emma's appointments?" "Oh yes, nothing like that. Actually, I'm calling because we received your volunteer application from last month, and we'd love to have you join our music therapy program." Mike had almost forgotten about that. 6 weeks ago, during one of Emma's appointments, he'd noticed a flyer in the waiting room asking for volunteers who could play instruments or sing for the pediatric patients. Music had always been his escape. His guitar, inherited from his father, was one of his most prized possessions. On a whim, he'd filled out an application, thinking it might be a way to give back, to turn his own pain into something useful. "That's great," Mike said, watching Emma organize her crayons on his workbench with serious concentration. "When would you need me?" "We're quite flexible. Many volunteers come in the evenings or on weekends. Even an hour or 2 a week makes such a difference to these kids." They scheduled his orientation for the following Saturday. As Mike hung up, Emma looked up at him with curious eyes. "Who was that, Daddy?" "That was the hospital, Mija. They asked if I'd like to sing for some of the kids there, the ones who have to stay for a while." Emma's eyes widened. "Like when you sing to me at bedtime?" "Yeah, kinda like that." "That's a good idea. Your songs always make me feel better when I'm sad." Mike ruffled her hair, his heart swelling. If he could bring even a fraction of the comfort to those hospital kids that he tried to bring to Emma every night, then it would be worth it. The following Saturday morning arrived with a crisp chill that promised an early winter. Mike dropped Emma off at his sister Rosa's house, guitar case in hand, and drove the 20 minutes to St. Catherine's. The hospital was a sprawling brick complex on the edge of downtown, its modern wings extending from a historic central building that dated back to the 1920s. Inside, the pediatric wing was a stark contrast to the sterile hospital environment Mike had expected. Bright murals covered the walls, underwater scenes with smiling dolphins, forests filled with friendly animals, outer space adventures with cartoon astronauts. It was clearly designed to be less frightening for children, but Mike could still feel the undercurrent of anxiety that permeated the space. Brenda met him at the volunteer desk, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a clipboard. Mr. Torres, so glad you could make it. Let me show you round and introduce you to some of our staff." The orientation was brief but thorough. Brenda explained the protocols. Always check with nurses before entering a room, respect privacy, keep performances brief if a child seems tired or uncomfortable, and most importantly, let the music be a gift, not a performance. "Our kids are dealing with so much," Brenda said, as they walked past rooms where children lay in beds, surrounded by monitors and IV poles. "Some are here for a few days, some for months. What you're offering isn't just entertainment, it's normalcy, it's joy, it's a reminder that life exists beyond these walls." Mike nodded, gripping his guitar case a little tighter. He'd thought he understood what he was signing up for, but seeing these kids, some bald from chemotherapy, some with casts and bandages, some who looked perfectly healthy but were fighting invisible battles inside their small bodies, made the reality hit home. "Ready for your first session?" Brenda asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." They started in the common room, where several ambulatory children were doing crafts with volunteers. Mike pulled out his guitar, tuned it quickly, and started with "You Are My Sunshine." Simple, familiar, safe. A few kids looked up with mild interest. One little boy in a wheelchair, couldn't have been more than 5, started humming along. Encouraged, Mike moved through his repertoire of classic children's songs and a few contemporary hits he'd learned for Emma. Some kids sang along, others just listened, and a few ignored him entirely, too absorbed in their own worlds of pain or medication-induced fog. But it felt right. It felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. After 45 minutes, Brenda touched his shoulder gently. "That was wonderful, Mike. There's one more room I'd like you to visit if you're up for it. 3rd floor, room 347. Little girl named Sophie. She was in a house fire 3 months ago. 2nd and 3rd degree burns, over 30% of her body. She's been through multiple surgeries and skin grafts. Doesn't talk much, understandably traumatized. But her nurse mentioned she sometimes responds to music from the hallway." Mike's chest tightened. "How old?" 6, almost 7, the same age as Emma. He thought of his daughter's bright smile, her unblemished skin, her fearless joy. Then he thought of what this Sophie must be going through. "I'll go," he said quietly. Room 347 was at the end of a quieter hallway, away from the bustle of the main pediatric ward. Mike stood outside the partially open door, guitar in hand, suddenly uncertain. Through the gap, he could see a small figure in the bed, heavily bandaged, turned toward the window where grey November clouds drifted across the sky. A nurse emerged, nearly bumping into him. Her name tag read, "Janet." "Oh, you must be the new music volunteer Brenda mentioned. Are you here for Sophie?" Mike nodded. "Is it okay? I don't want to intrude or upset her." Janet's expression softened. "Honestly, anything that might reach her would be welcome. She hasn't spoken a word since the fire. Her grandmother visits every day, but Sophie just stares out that window. The psychiatrist says she's processing trauma in her own way, but—" She trailed off, the weight of helplessness evident in her eyes. "I'll be gentle," Mike promised. He knocked softly on the door frame before entering. "Hi there, Sophie. My name's Mike. I brought my guitar, and I was hoping maybe you'd let me play you a song or two. You don't have to say anything or do anything. Just listen if you want. Is that okay?" The small figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge his presence at all. Mike settled into the chair near the window, careful to position himself where Sophie could see him if she chose to look, but not forcing himself into her line of sight. He started with something soft, "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," the Israel Kamakawiwo Olu version he'd learned years ago. His fingers moved gently over the strings, his voice low and warm, filling the sterile room with something human, something tender. Halfway through the song, Mike noticed the smallest movement. Sophie's fingers, visible beyond the bandages on her arms, had stopped their restless fidgeting. She wasn't looking at him, but she was listening. He continued with, "What a wonderful world." Then, Blackbird by the Beatles, songs about hope and healing and beauty persisting despite darkness. Mike wasn't sure if a 6-year-old would understand the metaphors, but something in him said it didn't matter. It was the emotion in the music that counted, the wordless communication that transcended age and trauma. 20 minutes passed. Sophie never turned her head, never spoke, but Mike sensed a shift in the room's energy. The rigid tension in her small body had eased slightly. When he finally stood to leave, he spoke softly. "Thank you for letting me play for you, Sophie. I'll come back next week if that's all right. You don't have to do anything different. Just keep being you, okay? You're doing great." As he reached the door, he heard it. So quiet he almost missed it. A small voice, raspy from disuse, barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Mike turned, but Sophie was still facing the window. He smiled, though she couldn't see it. "You're welcome, sweetheart. See you next week." In the hallway, Janet was waiting, her eyes questioning. Mike could only nod, too choked up to speak. She'd talked. After 3 months of silence, Sophie had spoken 2 words. The drive home felt different somehow. The gray Detroit streets seemed a little less bleak, the naked trees a little less dead, just waiting for spring. When Mike picked up Emma from Rosa's house, he held her extra tight, grateful beyond words for her health, her wholeness, her bright presence in his life. "How'd it go, Hermano?" Rosa asked from the doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Good," Mike said simply. "Really good." Over the next 3 weeks, Saturday mornings at St. Catherine's became the highlight of Mike's week. He'd spend an hour in the common room, then always end with a visit to room 347. Sophie remained mostly silent, but there were small victories. The day she turned her head slightly to watch him play, the day her grandmother was there, and Sophie actually looked at the woman when Mike sang, "You Are My Sunshine." The day she asked, still so quietly, if he knew any Disney songs. Mike learned everything he could. He spent his evenings after Emma went to bed, learning songs from Frozen, Moana, Encanto, whatever he thought might reach Sophie. He watched the pain in her eyes slowly recede, replaced by something that resembled curiosity, maybe even the faintest glimmer of hope. Janet kept him updated on Sophie's medical progress. The skin grafts were healing well. Physical therapy was excruciating, but Sophie was starting to cooperate more. The psychiatrist noted improvements in her affect and engagement. No one said it outright, but Mike knew the music was part of her healing. On his 4th visit, Mike arrived to find Sophie sitting up in bed, a first. Her bandages had been reduced, revealing healing skin that was red and scarred but alive, regenerating. She looked at him as he entered, and for the first time, she gave him a small, cautious smile. "Hi, Mike," she said, her voice stronger. "Hi, Sophie. You're looking good today. Sitting up and everything." She nodded. "It hurts less now. Grandma says I'm getting better." "You are getting better. You're one of the bravest kids I've ever met." Mike settled into his usual chair. "What should I play today?" "Do you know Let It Go?" Mike laughed. "Every parent in America knows Let It Go. I've played it about 1,000 times for my daughter Emma." "You have a daughter?" Sophie's eyes widened with interest. "I do. She's 7, just a little older than you. Loves to sing and dance, especially to that song." Does she look like you?" Mike pulled out his phone and showed Sophie a photo. Emma in her school uniform, grinning at the camera with her wild curls and missing front tooth. "She's pretty," Sophie said softly. But Mike heard something else in her voice. A sadness, a comparison being made. He put the phone away and spoke gently. "Sophie, can I tell you something?" She nodded, suddenly looking very small and vulnerable. "The fire that hurt you, it hurt your skin, and I know it's been so painful and scary, but it didn't hurt what matters most. It didn't hurt your beautiful smile, or your kind heart, or the way you listen to music, or anything that makes you you. You're still the same amazing Sophie you were before. You're just Sophie who survived something really hard, which makes you even more amazing." Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes, the first tears Mike had seen from her. "But I'm scary now." It looks scary. You don't look scary to me. You look like a warrior, like someone who fought a dragon and won. Sophie considered this, wiping her eyes carefully with her less bandaged hand. A warrior? Absolutely. Now, should I play that song? Or do you want to request something else, Princess Warrior Sophie? She giggled, actually giggled. The sound was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Play Let It Go, please. As Mike played, Sophie sang along, softly at first, then with growing confidence. Her voice was sweet and slightly off-key, and it was the most beautiful thing Mike had heard in years. November gave way to December, and St. Catherine's transformed into a winter wonderland. Garlands and twinkling lights decorated the hallways. Volunteers dressed as elves distributed small gifts, and there was a determined cheerfulness in the air that tried valiantly to combat the underlying sadness of children spending the holidays in a hospital. Mike continued his weekly visits, but he'd also started coming on Wednesday evenings when he could arrange for Rosa to watch Emma. Sophie was progressing remarkably, walking short distances now, speaking in full sentences, even joking with the nurses. The doctors were amazed at her resilience, both physical and psychological. On the second Wednesday of December, Mike was in the middle of Jingle Bells with a group of kids in the common room when he noticed someone watching from the doorway. A tall man in an expensive charcoal suit stood with his arms crossed, observing. His silver hair was impeccably styled, his presence commanding. Mike didn't recognize him, but something about the way the nurses straightened up when they noticed him suggested importance. Mike finished the song, accepted the scattered applause from his small audience, then started packing up his guitar. The man in the suit approached. "That was quite good," he said, his voice cultured and measured. "How long have you been volunteering here?" "About 2 months now," Mike replied, extending his hand. "Mike Torres." "Dr. Richard Hartwell, I'm the hospital director." He shook Mike's hand firmly, his gaze assessing. "Brenda speaks very highly of you. She says you've made quite an impact, particularly with one of our more difficult cases." Mike felt protective instincts flare. "If you're talking about Sophie, she's not difficult. She's a traumatized kid who needed time and patience." Doctor Hartwell's expression didn't change. "Sophie Martinez, yes, I've been reviewing her file. Her progress has been remarkable, beyond what we typically see in pediatric burn victims with her level of trauma. Her care team attributes much of her psychological recovery to your visits." Mike wasn't sure if he was being praised or interrogated. "I just play guitar and sing. The nurses and doctors are doing the real work." "Don't diminish what you're doing, Mr. Torres. Medical science can heal the body, but healing the spirit, that's something else entirely." Dr. Hartwell paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "I'd like to discuss expanding your role here. Do you have time to stop by my office before you leave today?" Sure, I guess so." "Excellent. 5th floor administrative wing. Ask for me at the desk." With that, Dr. Hartwell walked away, leaving Mike confused and slightly uneasy. He finished his rounds, spending extra time with Sophie as always. She was in good spirits, excited about the possibility of going home before Christmas if her next round of grafts healed well. "Grandma's making tamales," Sophie told him, her eyes bright. "She says we'll have a special celebration when I come home. Will you come?" Mike was touched. "I'd be honored, Sophie, but we'll have to see what your grandmother thinks about strange mechanics crashing her party." "You're not strange, you're Mike, and Grandma already said she wants to meet you properly and thank you." After his visit with Sophie, Mike made his way to the 5th floor, feeling out of place among the administrative offices with their sleek furniture and framed awards. Dr. Hartwell's secretary directed him to a large corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Detroit skyline. "Mr. Torres, please sit." Dr. Hartwell gestured to a leather chair across from his massive desk. "Can I offer you coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Dr. Hartwell leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "I'll be direct. St. Catherine's is preparing to launch a new program, a comprehensive music therapy initiative. We've secured grant funding, but we need the right people to make it work. I want you to be part of it." Mike blinked. I'm not a music therapist. I'm a mechanic who plays guitar. I'm aware of your professional background. What you are is someone with a genuine gift for connecting with traumatized children. I've watched your sessions. I've read the nurses' reports. I've seen Sophie's transformation firsthand. Dr. Hartwell pulled a folder from his desk. We'd want you to come on as a part-time music therapy aide, working under our certified music therapist. The position would be paid, not a fortune, but significantly more than you're making volunteering. You'd have benefits, including health insurance that covers dependents. Mike's mind raced. Health insurance for Emma alone would be worth considering, but this felt too big, too sudden. I have my shop. I can't just abandon my customers. The position would be 20 hours a week. You could maintain your shop, scale it back, hire help, whatever works for you. Think about it, Mr. Torres. This could be the beginning of something that helps hundreds of children, not just Sophie. You have a gift. It seems a shame not to use it fully. Mike stood, suddenly needing air. This is a lot to process. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course. Take through the holidays. We'd want someone to start in early January if possible. Dr. Hartwell stood as well, extending his hand again. I hope you'll seriously consider it. Men like you, men who know hardship, who have empathy forged in real struggle. You're rare. Don't underestimate what you could do with the proper support. Mike left the hospital in a daze. The December evening was cold and crisp, the first snow of the season beginning to fall in delicate flakes. He sat in his truck in the parking lot, engine running, heat blasting, trying to process what had just happened. A paid position, health insurance, the chance to do something meaningful beyond just keeping old cars running. But it also meant change, risk, stepping out of the safe routine he'd built for himself and Emma since Maria's death. His phone buzzed. A text from Rosa with a photo of Emma asleep on her couch, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. Looking at his daughter's peaceful face, Mike realized the question wasn't whether he could afford to take this risk. It was whether he could afford not to. Mike didn't give Dr. Hartwell an answer right away. Instead, he threw himself into the Christmas season, decorating the house with Emma, building elaborate gingerbread houses that collapsed spectacularly, driving through neighborhoods to look at light displays. He continued his volunteer work at St. Catherine's, watching Sophie grow stronger each week, seeing the light return to her eyes. On December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas, Brenda approached Mike with an unusual request. The hospital is having a Christmas Eve celebration in the main atrium tomorrow, she explained. Nothing fancy, just some carols, cookies, a visit from Santa for the kids who can make it. We were wondering if you'd be willing to perform. Maybe get some of the kids to sing along. Sophie has been telling everyone about you, and several parents have asked specifically if you'll be there. Mike's stomach knotted. Playing for 1 or 2 kids in a hospital room was one thing. A public performance was something else entirely. But when he saw the hope in Brenda's eyes, he found himself nodding. Yeah, okay, I'll do it. The next evening, Mike arrived early to set up. The atrium was beautiful, the hospital's tallest space, with a vaulted ceiling and a massive Christmas tree, decorated with handmade ornaments created by current and former patients. Each ornament told a story of survival, hope, recovery. Families began gathering, some children in wheelchairs, some with IV poles, some seemingly healthy but present for siblings or friends still being treated. Mike recognized many faces from his regular rounds. His hands were sweating as he tuned his guitar. Then he saw her. Sophie entered in a wheelchair pushed by her grandmother, a tiny woman with grey hair and fierce, loving eyes. Sophie was dressed in a red velvet dress, her scarred skin visible but no longer bandaged. She'd been fitted with a compression garment on one arm, but her face was healing beautifully, the scars fading to pink lines that would eventually become silver. When Sophie saw Mike, her face lit up. She waved enthusiastically, no longer hiding or ashamed. Mike waved back and something in his chest loosened. This was why he was here. Not for the performance, not for some potential job, but for this moment, this connection, this small victory of a child reclaiming her joy. Dr. Hartwell took the microphone first, welcoming everyone and acknowledging the hospital staff working through the holidays. Then he introduced Mike. "We have a special treat tonight. One of our volunteers, Mike Torres, has been bringing the gift of music to our patients for the past few months. His generosity and talent have touched many lives, and tonight he's here to share that gift with all of us." Mike stood on shaky legs and took his place by the Christmas tree. He looked out at the faces, children and parents, nurses and doctors, all carrying their own burdens of illness and worry and hope. "Hi, everyone," Mike began, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm not much of a speech maker, so I'm just going to play. But I want you to know that being here, getting to know these amazing kids, has been one of the greatest honors of my life. So this is for all of you, for your strength, your courage, and your hope." He started with Silent Night, his fingers moving over the familiar chords. A few tentative voices joined in. Then, "O Holy Night," his voice filling the atrium with the soaring melody. More voices joined. By the time he reached Jingle Bells, the whole atrium was singing, the sound echoing off the walls like a prayer. Mike could see tears streaming down some parents' faces, tears of joy, of relief, of the bittersweet gratitude that comes from watching your sick child smile. Then Mike made an impulsive decision. "I'd like to invite someone special to join me for this next song. Sophie, would you come up here?" Sophie's eyes went wide. Her grandmother whispered something, and Sophie nodded. With careful movements, Sophie stood from her wheelchair and walked slowly but steadily toward Mike. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause, recognizing the courage that simple walk represented. Mike knelt down to her level as she reached him. "What should we sing?" Sophie didn't hesitate. "Let It Go." Mike laughed along with the crowd. "The princess has spoken." They sang together, Sophie's sweet voice growing stronger with each verse, Mike harmonizing beneath. She was off-key in places, and she forgot some words, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the radiant smile on her face, the confidence in her stance, the way she transformed from a silent, traumatized child into this brave little girl singing in front of 100 people. As the final notes faded, the atrium exploded in applause. Sophie threw her arms around Mike's neck, careful of her healing skin, but uninhibited in her joy. Mike held her gently, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. "Thank you," Sophie whispered in his ear. "Thank you for helping me find my voice again." Mike couldn't speak. He just nodded and helped Sophie back to her grandmother, who grasped his hand tightly. "Bless you," the elderly woman said in accented English. "You gave me back my granddaughter." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of songs, cookies, and conversations. Parents stopped Mike to thank him, to tell him how much his music had meant to their children. Nurses hugged him. Even some of the doctors, normally stoic and professional, expressed their gratitude. As the celebration wound down, Dr. Hartwell approached Mike once more. "Have you thought about my offer?" he asked quietly. Mike looked around the atrium, at Sophie laughing with other children, at the decorated tree with its ornaments of survival, at the faces that had gone from strained to peaceful over the course of the evening. "I have," Mike replied, "and my answer is yes, but on one condition." Dr. Hartwell raised an eyebrow. "Which is? This doesn't become about me or about performances. It stays about the kids, about healing, about connection. The moment it becomes a show or a marketing thing, I'm out." Dr. Hartwell smiled, the first genuine smile Mike had seen from him. "Mr. Torres, I wouldn't want it any other way. Welcome to St. Catherine's." They shook hands, and Mike felt the weight of the decision settle on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a purpose. 3 months later, on a bright March morning, Mike stood in the parking lot of St. Catherine's, watching as Sophie, now walking unassisted, her scars fading, her spirit fully restored, ran to her grandmother's car for discharge. She turned back one last time and waved at Mike with both hands. "See you at therapy," she called. Sophie had decided she wanted to become a music therapist when she grew up, inspired by Mike's visits. Mike waved back, guitar case in his other hand, heading in for his shift. His auto shop was still running, now managed 3 days a week by a young mechanic he'd hired. The rest of his time belonged to St. Catherine's, to the kids who needed music and hope and someone to remind them that their scars, visible or invisible, didn't define them. Emma understood. She'd even started coming with him sometimes on weekends, her bright presence bringing additional joy to the pediatric wing. She and Sophie had become friends, proving that connections forged in hardship often become the strongest bonds. As Mike walked through the hospital doors, a nurse stopped him. "Room 512 just admitted a new patient. 8-year-old boy, car accident, multiple fractures, pretty scared and withdrawn. I thought maybe..." Mike smiled. "I'll go see him after the group session." Because this was his purpose now. Not fixing broken machines, but helping mend broken spirits. One song at a time, one child at a time, one moment of connection at a time. The hospital director had been right. Mike did have a gift, but it wasn't just the music. It was the empathy of someone who'd known loss, who understood pain, who could offer not just entertainment, but genuine human connection in the midst of suffering. And in helping others heal, Mike found that he was healing too. The raw wound of Maria's death, while never disappearing, had transformed into something bearable, something purposeful. He couldn't save his wife, but he could honor her memory by saving others in the ways he could, through compassion, through presence, through the simple act of showing up with a guitar and an open heart. As he settled into the common room and began tuning his guitar, children started gathering. Some he knew, some new faces. But each one needed the same thing, to feel seen, to feel valued, to remember that they were more than their illnesses or injuries. Mike strummed the opening chords of "Here Comes the Sun," and as young voices tentatively joined in, he smiled. This was where he belonged. This was home.